Title: The Quiet Door Across. I moved into Harbor Light Towers because my bank account could afford mildew and stairs, not comfort. The building clung to the hillside above the docks like a stubborn barnacle. 12 floors, no elevator, and hallways that held onto every smell that passed through sea salt. Frying garlic, wet concrete, the sharp medicinal bite of disinfectant. The lease called it a legacy structure, which sounded nicer than old and a lot kinder than unsafe. I told myself I was lucky. The rent was low, my job at the ferry dispatch office was steady, and the view from Unit 12B made the water look like a sheet of hammered silver when the sun hit right. The stairs, though, were a daily negotiation with my body. My left leg ended at the knee. The prosthetic was reliable when it wanted to be, temperamental when the weather shifted, and always louder than I wished in quiet places. By the third trip up, sweat crawled down my back and my socket rubbed raw. I sat on the landing, breathing through my nose, listening to distant gulls and the faint roar of engines. That's when the first notification buzzed on my phone. Harbor Light Residents Board new post. Who stole the donation box? I have the donation box. If you've never lived in a building where everyone shares thin walls and thinner patience, you might not understand how quickly a group chat becomes a courtroom. The post came with photos. A cardboard box labeled Storm Relief Fund, missing from the lobby, followed by screenshots of a security feed, grainy, angled, and accusatory. Within minutes, names were thrown like stones. People typed in all caps. Someone suggested calling the police. Someone else suggested handling it in-house. I hadn't even unpacked my kettle, yet there I was, watching strangers turn into detectives. Then a new comment rose to the top. It was the people in 12A, obviously. They've been dragging bags in and out all week. I glanced across the corridor. The door to 12A was a dull maroon, scuffed near the knob, with a faded sticker of a lighthouse peeling at the corner. It looked quiet. Too quiet for villains. I thought until night fell and the shouting began. It wasn't the cinematic kind, the sort that echoes down a marble hall. It was domestic, ragged, and too close, slamming into my thin door like a fist. A woman's voice, a man's voice, a third voice that sounded younger, high with panic, and then silence so sudden my stomach tightened. I stood in my kitchen holding a spoon, frozen, and hated myself for listening. Harbor Light turned private lives into shared noise. That was the deal you made when you paid cheap rent for a view. The next evening, my shift ran late. The ferries had been delayed by rough water, and I spent hours on the phone rerouting passengers while the clock crept past midnight. When I finally climbed the last flight, my thigh trembled with fatigue, and I was already thinking about a shower and bed. The hallway lights were motion sensor, and half the sensors had died months ago, which meant the corridor lived in a permanent dusk unless you waved your arms like you were surrendering. I didn't see the obstruction until my toe hit it. A hard cylinder rolled under my foot. My prosthetic skidded. For a heart-dropping second, I tried to catch myself on the railing, but my hand slipped on something slick, and I went down, hip first, shoulder second, the socket twisting as my body fought the wrong direction. Pain shot up my spine. The prosthetic detached with a sound like a snapped buckle. I lay there in the dark, swallowing curses, phone light shaking in my palm. In the beam, the hallway looked like a storm had swept through. Stacks of paper bags, bundled newspapers, plastic crates, and boxes crushed flat and piled chest-high outside 12A, narrowing the passage to a crooked path. Dampness glistened on the floor, a thin trail of liquid that smelled faintly of sugar and rust. My anger arrived fast, hot, and unfair. I had just traded one kind of stress for another. I banged on 12A with my knuckles until they burned. Hey! Whoever lives here, this isn't your storage unit. People have to walk. No answer. I hit the door again, louder. I fell. Do you hear me? I fell because of your mess. The building held its breath. Somewhere down the stairwell, a door clicked shut. My own voice sounded too big. I retrieved my prosthetic like a fallen tool, clipped it back on with shaking hands, and limped to 12B with my pride dragging behind me. Sleep didn't come clean. It came in shards. Dreams of collapsing staircases, of water rising in the hallway, of paper bags splitting open to spill insects that crawled up my prosthetic and into my skin. In the morning, I woke early out of pure irritation, determined to photograph the obstruction and send a complaint to management so thorough it would make them regret giving me an email address. I opened my door and stopped. The corridor was spotless, not merely cleared, scrubbed. The floor shone, the railing gleamed, and even the maroon door across from mine looked freshly wiped, its surface reflecting a ghostly version of my own startled face. For a second I wondered if exhaustion had invented the whole fall. My hip answered with a bruise-deep ache. I exhaled sharply and noticed a square of paper taped to my door. The handwriting was uneven, as if the writer had used a marker meant for bigger, bolder things. It read, "Sorry for trouble." 3 R's. One missing O, in trouble. Beneath it, stuck with old, yellowed tape, was a tiny bandage printed with cartoon whales. I stared at it, then at the clean corridor, and felt the strange frustration of having nowhere to aim my anger. I peeled the note off, folded it once, and told myself I wasn't moved. I wasn't. I dropped it in my trash anyway. Being softened by a misspelled apology felt like letting someone win. Management answered my call with a tired voice and the kind of practiced sympathy that never costs anything. "You're in 12B, right? We're sorry about last night. The situation across from you is delicate." She explained that Unit 12A was technically in probate. The legal owner, an elderly man named Mr. Calder, had lived there for decades. His son and daughter-in-law had left temporarily months ago and stopped returning calls. The only people still inside were Mr. Calder and his granddaughter, a 13-year-old named Tamsin. "She's doing her best," the manager said, as if best came with an asterisk. "Mr. Calder's condition is worsening. We have social services checking in, but the kid avoids them. She hides when anyone official comes up." I gripped my phone. "A 13-year-old is alone with an elderly man?" "Not alone," she corrected quickly. "There's an aunt family on the daughter-in-law's side. She's been advocating." The pause told me another word belonged there, one less polite. When I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the bay. Boats cut small white lines in the water. People moved through their lives as if support structures were guaranteed. I had been 18 when my own structure collapsed, an accident, a hospital, a surgeon with careful eyes telling me the leg couldn't be saved. Back then my parents called my injury a setback until the insurance bills arrived, and then it became a burden. I learned early that being owed care and being given care were different things. I didn't want that knowledge to be the only inheritance a kid across the hall received. I told myself I was not responsible. Then I bought extra supplies anyway. It started small. A bag of rice left near 12A when I went out for groceries, 2 cans of soup, a packet of antiseptic wipes because the bandage on my door had looked like it had come from a drawer that hadn't been opened in years. I never knocked. I never waited. I placed the items on the cracked doormat with the peeling lighthouse sticker and retreated to my door as if delivering contraband. The first time the bag disappeared, it happened the way a mouse steals crumbs. Fast, silent, leaving only a slight shift in the air. I watched through my peephole like a suspicious ghost. The door opened a finger width. A small hand snatched the bag, and it was gone. No thanks, no sound. I should have been offended. Instead, I felt relief-proof that someone was alive in there. Proof that my small effort did not turn into wasted charity. Over the next days, I saw Tamsin in flashes in the stairwell. A thin girl with hair hacked unevenly near her ears. Shoulders always drawn up as if she expected a blow. She wore the same oversized hoodie no matter the weather, and her eyes stayed on the floor. The residence board called her the scrap kid. Complaints piled up. "She's dragging metal through the lobby." She banged on my door begging for bottles. She charged me to wash my car, then splashed it again if I didn't pay. Some posts were cruel. Some were simply exhausted. I read them at night, scrolling in bed, and hated how easy it was for people to forget that children become sharp when they're forced to be tools. One evening I came home to find an argument burning in the hallway. A woman in a tailored coat stood outside 12A with 2 men, one holding a clipboard, another holding a plastic crate. The woman's lipstick was too bright for Harbor Light's dim corridors. Her voice carried the smoothness of practice. "Tam, open the door. We're here to help your grandfather. You cannot manage his care. This is irresponsible." The door stayed shut. From behind it came a boyish shout, hoarse with strain. "I can. He's fine. Go away." The woman sighed theatrically. "Listen to yourself. You're a child. Don't make this difficult." She turned slightly and caught sight of me. Her gaze traveled down my body and stopped briefly at my prosthetic. Something tightened in her expression, judgment disguised as assessment. "And you are?" she asked. "Neighbor," I said, because it was the simplest truth. "Mara, Unit 12B. She smiled without warmth. "I'm Diane Harlow, family. Mr. Calder's daughter-in-law's sister. We're arranging proper placement. He needs a facility. The clipboard man shifted, uncomfortable. The door rattled as if someone inside had thrown their weight against it. A small voice, younger and thinner, broke through. "Don't take him." Then a sharp crack, as if a hand had slapped a doorframe, followed by a strangled sound. My chest tightened. My body moved before my brain approved. I stepped forward and planted myself between Diane and the door. "If you're family, why is the kid begging like that?" Diane's smile sharpened. "Don't get involved. This is none of your business." I looked at the clipboard. "Is this a court order?" The man swallowed. "It's an assessment. A recommendation." Diane's hand flicked as if swatting a fly. "We can have the sheriff if we need to." I lifted my phone. "Or we can have the police now if anyone is threatening a minor." The words came out calmer than my pulse felt. In the peephole of 12A, I sensed eyes watching. Diane's jaw clenched. She leaned toward me and lowered her voice. "People like you always want to play hero," she murmured, glancing again at my leg. Like my injury was evidence of a savior complex. "But you don't understand what's at stake." I met her gaze. "What's at stake is a kid's safety. Leave." Her men hesitated. Diane held the smile a beat too long, then snapped. "Fine. We'll do this properly." She strode to the stairs, heels clicking, and the clipboard men followed like reluctant shadows. When the hallway quieted, I stood there, feeling foolish and upright, the way you feel after stepping into a puddle you can't pretend you didn't. The door to 12A opened a crack. A face appeared, sharp cheekbones, a bruise blooming near the hairline, eyes the dark green of deep water. She stared at my prosthetic like it was a weapon. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "She'll come back worse." "I know," I said, "but she was already here." The girl hesitated. "Grandpa's scared," she admitted. "He thinks the building is a ship sometimes. He thinks the stairs are the gangplank." She spoke in a rush, as if language was something you had to spend before it was stolen. "He doesn't like strangers. He doesn't like locked doors. He gets stuck in time." I softened my voice. "I'm not a stranger. I'm across the hall." Tamsin's eyes narrowed, defensive by habit. "You fell," she said suddenly, as if confessing an accusation. "The bags. I cleaned. I wrote sorry. I can't spell good." "I noticed," I replied, then regretted the edge in my tone when her chin dipped. I exhaled. "Thank you for cleaning. Just don't block the hall again." She nodded quickly. "Okay, I won't." A beat. "Why did you help?" "Because," I said, searching for a reason that didn't sound like pity. "Because I don't like bullies." Her gaze flickered, almost amused. Then she closed the door with a soft click. It wasn't gratitude, but it also wasn't rejection. In Harbor Light, that counted as progress. The following weeks rearranged my life in small, persistent ways. I started noticing details. The time the maroon door opened at dawn so Tamsin could carry a bucket down to the lobby, the way she avoided the security camera by hugging the wall, the fact that my bicycle left in the rack downstairs was mysteriously dry after a rainstorm. I began leaving a clean towel outside her door on days I knew the weather would turn. I pretended it was practical, not care. Meanwhile, my body began to betray me in subtler ways than the prosthetic's irritation. At work, I found myself rereading the same ferry schedule, numbers blurring. I woke at night with my fingertips tingling and a deep ache in my bones that felt like weather in my marrow. I scheduled a clinic appointment, telling myself it was a routine check on my old injury, nothing dramatic. Dr. Arun Patel had kind eyes and a habit of listening to silences, not just words. He reviewed my blood work, then set the file down slowly. "Mara," he said, "I want you to bring someone you trust to the next appointment." The room seemed to tilt. "I don't have someone," I replied before I could stop myself. He didn't flinch. "Then we'll find someone. And in the meantime, I need you to prepare for more tests." Outside the clinic, the sky looked normal, and that made it cruel. People drank iced coffee. A dog trotted past with a wagging tail. The world did not pause for my fear. On the walk back up the hill to Harbor Light, my prosthetic clicked with each step like a metronome counting down. That night I heard a crash from 12A, followed by a thin cry. I stood in my kitchen holding the edge of the counter, listening to my own heartbeat, and hated how quickly my mind jumped to worst possibilities. I crossed the hall and knocked once, then twice. "Tam?" Silence. I tried the knob. Locked. I pressed my ear to the door. A low voice, trembling and older than it should be, mumbled something about the tide coming in. I knocked again, louder. "Open up! It's Mara." After a moment, the chain slid. The door opened to reveal a cramped living room lit by a single lamp. A man lay on a recliner, blankets tangled, eyes wide with confusion. His hands gripped the armrests, as if the chair were a lifeboat. Tamsin stood beside him, shaking. "He fell, trying to get to the bathroom," she said quickly. "He thinks the hallway is the deck." She tried to smile, but it fractured. I stepped inside, my prosthetic tapping against worn floorboards. "Okay," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "Let's get him comfortable." "Mr. Calder's gaze found my face and lingered as though searching a memory. "Are we anchored?" he asked. I swallowed against the tightness in my throat. "Yes," I said softly. "We're safe." Together, we guided him back, slow and careful. He was lighter than I expected, all bone and fragile dignity. When he settled, his eyes closed with relief. Tamsin's shoulders sagged. She looked at me as if waiting for punishment. "Don't call anyone," she blurted. "They'll take him. They'll take me." I considered the calendar of my own tests, the shadow in my blood work, the way fear makes people build fortresses out of bad decisions. "I'm not calling anyone right now," I said. "But you need help. This can't be only you." She stared at the floor. "It's always me," she whispered. The sentence landed like a stone in water. I wanted to tell her it wouldn't be. Not anymore. But promises are easy when you're not the one who will pay if they break. Instead, I said, "Let me start with something smaller. Let me bring you a mattress pad. That chair is going to bruise him." Her eyes flickered up. "Why?" "Because you're doing too much," I said simply, "and because you deserve a softer place to land." The next day I called Dr. Patel and, with my voice half shame, asked if he knew any social worker who wouldn't lead with threats. He gave me a number for a community advocate, Miss Inez Ramos, who spoke with a blunt warmth that made me trust her. "A kid guarding an elder is a kid who's been taught the world steals," she said. "We can show her the world also gives, but it takes time." We arranged to visit 12A together on a Saturday afternoon, when I knew Tamsin would be home. I knocked, introduced Inez through the chain, and waited. The chain stayed. "I don't want help," Tamsin shouted through the door. "Help is just a trick." Inez didn't argue. She sat cross-legged on the hallway floor like she had all day. "Okay," she called, calm as tidewater. "Then I'll sit here and tell you a story about a boy who thought every gift had teeth. When you're bored enough, you can listen." Harbor Light's corridor held our voices and passed them back, softer. After 5 minutes, the chain rattled. The door opened. Tamsin stood there, arms crossed, chin lifted in defiance that trembled. "Talk," she said. Inez smiled and launched into a story about her own grandmother, about stubbornness and pride, about asking for help as an act of courage rather than surrender. I watched Tamsin's face change in tiny ways, suspicion easing into curiosity, curiosity into something like hope. Behind her, Mr. Calder stared at the television, which played a muted weather report, and murmured directions as if steering a ship. The apartment was clean in a way that startled me, floors swept, dishes stacked, corners dusted, nothing like the chaotic hallway pile I'd fallen into. In the bedroom doorway I saw a calendar with careful check marks, and beside it, a list written in crooked letters. Meds, water, soup, lock door, breathe, a child's survival plan. I looked away so no one would see my throat tighten. Diane returned 2 days later, not in person at first, but through the residence board. New post, neighbor interference endangering elder legal action pending. She painted herself as a rescuer blocked by nosy tenants and hinted that certain individuals were using sympathy to manipulate property outcomes. The subtext was loud. Money. The building had recently been surveyed by a development company called Seaward Partners, and rumors swirled about a buyout. Harbor Light's view was worth far more than its crumbling pipes. When Inez researched the probate file, she found something curious. Mr. Calder's unit was one of the few still under an old cooperative agreement that complicated eviction and sale. "Somebody wants that paperwork," she told me, "and a kid is in the way." My test results came back the same week. Dr. Patel sat with me under fluorescent lights and explained that the condition I thought I'd left behind, an autoimmune attack that had once eaten at my nerves, was active again. Not a death sentence, he was careful to say, but a battle, and battles require allies. I nodded, feeling numb. On the walk home, I stopped on the landing of the 8th floor and pressed my forehead to the cool wall, letting tears come silently. I wasn't afraid of pain. I'd lived with pain. I was afraid of being reduced, again, to a problem others would rather not solve. In that moment, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Mara, it's Tam. Grandpa is outside." I ran an absurd word for what I did, which was half limp, half hop downstairs, while my prosthetic screamed at my skin. In the lobby, I found Mr. Calder in his pajamas standing by the glass doors, hands pressed to the pane, watching the docks as if waiting for a ship that would never come. Tamsin hovered behind him, panicked. "He woke up and said he had to meet the captain," she said, breathless. I tried to stop him, but he got mad. "Mr. Calder turned at the sound of our voices, eyes bright with agitation. "The tide's wrong," he insisted. "We'll scrape the hull." I approached slowly, like you approach a startled animal. "Mr. Calder," I said gently. "The captain asked us to wait inside. He doesn't want you in the cold." His gaze flicked to my leg, then to my face, and something softened. "You're not from the crew," he said, suspicious. "I'm from the upstairs deck," I answered, improvising. "Tamsin's friend." He frowned, then glanced at Tamsin. She nodded desperately. She's okay," she said. She brought rice. For the first time, Mr. Calder smiled faintly. "Ah," he murmured, as if rice were a sacred password. "Then we can wait." Together we guided him back, and when the elevatorless building demanded its price of breath and effort, I paid it without complaint. In 12A, Tamsin slammed the door and slid down it, shaking. "If they take him," she whispered, "they'll say I failed." I crouched beside her, my own legs protesting. "You didn't fail," I said. "You're 13. You're doing an adult job with kid-sized tools." She wiped her face with her sleeve in furious embarrassment. "Don't say 13 like it's small," she snapped. "It's big enough to know when people leave." The words were sharp, and I deserved them. I sat back against the wall, letting my breathing steady. "You're right," I admitted. "It's big enough to remember." She stared at me, caught off guard by my agreement. In that pause, the air shifted between us. Not trust yet, but a bridge plank laid down. The bridge was tested quickly. Diane arrived with a uniformed officer and a social services representative on a Thursday afternoon, just as I was returning from an infusion appointment with my arm still sore and my head heavy. The hallway filled with official voices. The officer's posture was polite but firm. "We received a report of an at-risk elder in an unsafe environment," he said. Diane stood behind him, eyes shining with victory, lips curved in a rehearsed sadness. Tamsin appeared in the doorway of 12. A like a guard dog, thin shoulders squared. "He's safe," she said, voice low. "He's fed. He's clean." Diane sighed and pressed a hand to her heart. "Sweetie, this isn't about blame. It's about what's best." "What's best for who?" I asked, stepping into view. Diane's eyes flashed. "Oh, good," she said. "The neighbor." Inez arrived moments later, carrying a folder of documents and the calm of someone who has stared down bureaucracy before breakfast. She greeted the social worker by name. The energy changed. Paperwork appeared. Diane's smile tightened as Inez presented a list of services already arranged. Home health visits, meal support, a safety rail install, all approved and scheduled. "We're not refusing help," Inez said evenly. "We're requesting appropriate, least disruptive assistance. Removal is a last resort, not a first convenience." The officer looked relieved to have an exit. The social worker nodded, taking notes. Diane leaned in toward me, voice like a blade wrapped in velvet. "You think you're protecting her," she hissed, "but you're attaching yourself to a sinking ship. When it goes down, it'll pull you with it." I felt my own fear rise my diagnosis, my future. The possibility that she was right about one thing. No one in Harbor Light survived alone. I lifted my chin anyway. "Then I'll learn to swim again," I said. Diane blinked, thrown by the image, and I took the small victory like oxygen. After they left, Tamsin didn't thank me. She didn't have to. Instead, she disappeared into her apartment and returned with a dented tin box that looked like it had once held cookies. She placed it in my hands, heavy. "Grandpa says if something happens," she muttered, eyes averted. "You should keep this." I hesitated. "I can't take your things." "It's not mine," she snapped, then softened. "It's his. He forgets where he hides it. Diane wants it. The box had a simple latch. I didn't open it. Trust is not the same as curiosity. Okay, I said, tucking it under my arm. I'll keep it safe. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. Later that night, alone in my kitchen, I examined the tin's bottom. Someone had taped a waterproof envelope there. Inside were folded papers, a cooperative membership certificate, a hand-drawn map of Harbor Light's basement levels, and a letter written in tidy, looping handwriting. It was dated 4 months earlier. Mr. Calder explained that he had discovered irregularities in Seaward Partners' inspection reports missing, hazard disclosures, falsified measurements, bribes offered to tenants to vacate quickly. He wrote that he feared retaliation. He wrote that if his memory failed him, someone needed to take the documents to the city's housing office. At the end, he added a note in a shakier hand. If you are reading this, the sea is still there. Do not let them steal your sky. I stared at the sentence until my eyes blurred. It wasn't just property, I realized. It was a fight over who gets to stay in view of beauty, who is told they deserve darkness because they cannot pay for light. The day Mr. Calder died was bright. That felt wrong too. I came home from work to find paramedics in the hallway, and Tamsin sitting on the floor with her knees hugged to her chest, face blank as a scraped plate. The medic's voice was soft. We did what we could. Tamsin didn't cry. She looked at my prosthetic as if it were the only stable object in the world. He asked for the captain, she said, voice hollow. I told him the captain was waiting. I lied. I knelt carefully beside her. My hip protested. My head swam with fatigue, but I held her hand anyway. Sometimes a lie is a bridge, I said. You got him somewhere safe. Her fingers tightened around mine so hard it hurt. The next hours blurred into forms, calls, strangers moving through 12A with respectful efficiency. Diane arrived wearing black, grief painted on like makeup. She spoke loudly about family duty, about honoring Mr. Calder's legacy, about making sure everything is handled appropriately. Inez stayed close, watching. I kept the tin box hidden in my pantry. At midnight, when the hallway finally emptied, Tamsin stood in my doorway, eyes wide and dry. They're going to take me, she said. It was not a question. It was a weather forecast. I swallowed. My own health felt suddenly irrelevant, small compared to the catastrophe in front of me. Not without a fight, I said. She stared as if the concept was foreign. Then her expression crumpled in a way that finally let a sob escape. It sounded like something that had been trapped for years. I pulled her into my arms. She was all angles and shaking breath. She smelled of soap and old dust in the ocean. I held her until my own arms trembled. 2 days later, Tamsin disappeared. I woke to a message from Inez. Emergency. Diane filed for temporary guardianship overnight. I ran across the hall, knocking until my knuckles burned. But 12A was silent. The maroon door stood closed, the lighthouse sticker now replaced with a fresh strip of white tape, like a bandage on a wound. In the lobby, residents whispered. Someone said they saw a car at dawn. Someone else said, probably for the best. And that sentence made me feel ill. I tried calling the social worker, then the officer, then anyone whose number I had gathered in my weeks of reluctant involvement. My phone became hot in my hand. No one could tell me where Tamsin had been taken. She's a minor, they said. Privacy. Privacy, in this context, meant disappearance. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my table with the tin box open, papers spread like a fragile proof of purpose. My diagnosis hovered at the edge of everything. Treatments to schedule, energy to ration, the possibility that I was building a fight I might not have the strength to finish. Then I remembered something small and stupidly hopeful. The whale bandage on my door. The way Tamsin had used what she had, even if it was old and imperfect, to apologize. A person who apologizes, I thought, is not finished. I decided I would not let her vanish quietly. Harbor Light's residence board, so eager to accuse, became my first tool. I posted, not a plea but a statement. A child from 12A has been removed without explanation. If you saw anything car model, time, direction, message me privately. This is about her safety. Some replies were defensive. Some were nasty. But others, unexpectedly, were human. Mrs. Klein from 7C, who had once complained about the scrap kids' noise, sent me a photo from her window. A silver sedan idling by the curb at 5:42 a.m. Mr. Juno from 3A, who always smelled of motor oil, recognized the license plate prefix as belonging to a county fleet. The security guard, bribed in kindness with a bag of homemade dumplings from Mrs. Klein, admitted that Diane had flashed paperwork and rushed a child down the stairs without waiting for proper verification. Piece by piece, the fog thinned. Inez pulled strings with her contacts and found a name. Gullhaven Transitional Home, a facility run by a private contractor that had recently won a city bid Seaward Partners subcontractor. The web tightened. Mr. Calder's papers suddenly felt like more than a moral cause. They were a key. If Seaward wanted Harbor Light emptied, controlling Tamsin would control Unit 12A's legal complications. I understood Diane's confidence now. She wasn't just greedy. She was backed by a machine. I went to Gullhaven the next day with Inez and Dr. Patel, who had insisted on coming when he learned I planned to confront a private facility while mid-treatment. "You need a witness and you need a calm voice," he said. "I can be both." His presence steadied me more than I wanted to admit. Gullhaven sat behind a chain-link fence, topped with plastic slats meant to look friendly. Inside, the air smelled of cafeteria food and too much cleaner. A receptionist asked for our names, then told us, smiling, that visits were by appointment only. Inez showed her credential. Dr. Patel mentioned he was Tamsin's documented medical advocate through the community clinic. The receptionist's smile faltered. We waited in a room with posters about resilience. After 30 minutes, Diane appeared, as if conjured by our persistence. "This is harassment," she snapped. "The child is safe." "Then let us see her," Inez replied. "You have temporary guardianship, not ownership." Diane's eyes narrowed. "Mara wants the apartment," she accused, voice rising. "That's all this is?" I felt heat in my cheeks. "If I wanted property," I said, "I would have chosen a building with an elevator." Dr. Patel stepped forward gently. "Miss Harlow, children who experience sudden loss need stability, not isolation. Let her speak." Diane's mouth twisted. "She doesn't want to speak," she said. "She's traumatized by that neighbor's interference." Inez leaned in, calm and deadly. "Then we can have a judge decide whether your subcontractor relationship with Seaward Partners is a conflict of interest." Diane went still. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. The word conflict was a hook in the right place. Minutes later, a staff member led Tamsin into the room. She looked smaller in the facility's fluorescent light. Hoodie gone, replaced by a donated sweater that didn't fit. Her hair had been brushed, which somehow made her look more vulnerable. She stared at me as if I might be another illusion. Then her jaw clenched. "You came," she said, voice raw. I swallowed hard. "Of course," I replied. She blinked fast, fighting tears the way you fight a door that keeps trying to close. We couldn't take her home that day. Systems move at their own pace, and Diane still had enough paperwork to stall. But we left with something valuable. Tamsin's statement, recorded by Inez and witnessed by Dr. Patel, describing Diane's threats, the rushed removal, and the facility's connection to Seaward. "She told me I'd be grateful when she sold the unit," Tamsin said flatly, eyes fixed on the table. "She said Grandpa's papers were family property, and if I didn't hand them over, she'd make sure I never saw the water again." The sentence sliced through me. Never see the water again. In Harbor Light, the view wasn't just scenery. It was proof that beauty was still allowed to reach you. I squeezed Tamsin's hand under the table. Diane's face hardened. "You're poisoning her," she said to me, voice low. I leaned closer, my own voice quiet. "You're the one trying to steal her sky," I answered. Diane's eyes flashed, but she said nothing. For the first time, I believed she could lose. The next month became a two-front war. My body versus its own misfiring immune system, and our tiny coalition versus a network of paperwork and money. I spent mornings at the clinic receiving infusions, afternoons on the phone with Inez and a legal aid attorney named Calvin, and nights trying to work my dispatch job without letting fatigue drown me. Some days my hands shook too much to type. Some nights I woke with my muscles cramping, terrified that my prosthetic would be the first thing I lost the ability to manage. I didn't tell Tamsin every detail. Children can smell fear, and I didn't want her to think she had to start guarding me too. Still, she noticed. On the days I returned pale, she would show up at my door with a thermos of broth she had learned to make from a library cookbook. "Eat," she would order, attempting bossiness and landing in something adorable and heartbreaking. In return, I made her sit at my table with a notebook and practice spelling. I refused to let sorry remain her default. "Apologies are important," I told her. but so is the ability to write your own story. She rolled her eyes and wrote the word important 4 different ways before getting it right. We laughed more than either of us expected. Laughter, in that period, felt like stealing back minutes from the people trying to erase us. Then my past arrived like a bill I'd forgotten to pay. My mother and brother showed up at Harbor Light on a rainy afternoon, their umbrellas bright and new in contrast to the building's peeling paint. I hadn't given them my address. They found it anyway, the way people who want something always do. My mother's face crumpled into practiced concern. "Mara," she said, reaching for me, "we heard you're sick again." My brother hovered behind her, eyes darting toward my door, toward the view. I felt my body go cold. "Who told you?" I asked. My mother's lips trembled. "A friend from the clinic. She said you were alone. We couldn't sleep, thinking about it." Her voice hit all the right notes. For a second, old hunger rose in me, the child's wish to be cared for by the people who were supposed to care. Then I saw the camera crew behind them. 2 people with microphones, and a man holding a lens aimed like a weapon. A badge on the cameraman's jacket read, "Heartline's Real Stories." My stomach dropped. My mother turned slightly, exposing the crew like a magician revealing a trick. "They want to film a piece about family reconciliation," she said softly. "It could help with donations, treatment costs, you know." I stared at her. "You brought strangers to my door." "It's a chance," she insisted. "People love a comeback story. And if you don't make it, Mara, at least your brother could have a stable place. He's getting married. He needs—" The word snapped something inside me. "Stop," I said, louder than I meant. The hallway echoed. Doors cracked open. Neighbors peeked. My brother's face reddened. "Don't embarrass us," he hissed. "We're trying to help." I laughed one sharp sound. "You're trying to harvest me," I said. "Like you harvest everything." My mother's eyes filled with performative tears. "After all we did for you," she whispered, stepping closer so the camera could catch her trembling. I backed away, my prosthetic clicking, and raised my phone. "Leave," I said. "If you don't, I'm calling security, and I'll tell the building board exactly why a TV crew is here." The crew shifted, uncertain. My mother's expression flickered from sorrow to irritation before she remembered the performance. "You're ungrateful," she hissed, voice no longer sweet. "You always were." The words should have hurt. Instead, they landed on a place already scarred. I watched them turn and retreat down the stairs, the camera following, and I felt a strange calm settle. I had spent years wanting them to choose me. Now, with a 13-year-old across the hall choosing me in her imperfect, stubborn way, I understood that choice is what makes family, not blood. The court hearing that finally broke Diane's grip happened on a Tuesday morning. I sat in the back row with Inez, Dr. Patel, and Calvin. My infusion port hidden under my shirt, my hands clenched in my lap. Tamsin sat at a table with a court-appointed advocate, small in her borrowed blazer, chin lifted like a lighthouse against a storm. Diane's lawyer spoke about unstable environments and unsafe influences. He implied that my disability made me incapable of support. Diane dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. Then Calvin stood, calm as an anchor, and presented Mr. Calder's letter, the cooperative certificate, the map, and evidence tying Diane to Seaward Partners contractor. He also played a recording of Diane's own words, captured in the facility's hallway, when she thought no one was listening. "Once the unit clears, Seaward will make it worth our while." The room shifted. The judge's eyes sharpened. Diane's face drained of color. When the judge ruled to revoke Diane's temporary guardianship pending investigation, I felt my breath leave me in a shaky rush. Tamsin didn't smile. She simply closed her eyes for one long second, as if memorizing what relief felt like. Afterward, outside the courthouse, she turned to me. "What happens now?" she asked. The question held more than logistics. It held the fear of the next abandonment. I reached into my bag and pulled out the tin box, now emptied of its documents. "Now," I said, "we take the rest of Mr. Calder's evidence to the housing office, and we make noise they can't scrub away overnight." Dr. Patel nodded. "And we keep you both healthy enough to enjoy the view," he added. Tamsin glanced at my face, reading the parts I hid. "You're shaking," she observed. I forced a grin. "Stairs are honest," I said. Her lips twitched. "So are you," she replied. And I nearly cried on the courthouse steps. Seaward Partners didn't fall in one dramatic crash. Machines like that resist quietly. But the documents forced inspections. And inspections forced delays. Delays gave Harborlight tenants leverage. The Residence Board, once a place for blame, became a bulletin for meetings, petitions, and the astonishing realization that shared walls could create shared power. Mrs. Klein baked trays of cookies for volunteers. Mr. Juno fixed the lobby camera angle. Even the loudest complainers began to look at 12A's maroon door differently, no longer as a nuisance, but as a symbol of what could be taken from any of them if they stood alone. Meanwhile, Tamsin came home under a foster arrangement that placed her temporarily with me, supervised by Inez's program. She moved into my tiny guest nook with her backpack and a shoebox of belongings. The first night she lay awake, stiff as a board, listening to the building's creaks. "It sounds like someone walking," she whispered. "That's just Harborlight breathing," I told her. She didn't believe me until I handed her earplugs. She accepted them like a treasure. The next morning she woke early and, without being asked, cleaned the kitchen counters until they shone. "You don't have to earn your place here," I said gently. She froze, sponge in hand. "I know," she lied. "I didn't push. Healing is not a door you can kick open. You have to coax it, one hinge at a time." My own hinge failed 2 weeks later. I collapsed in the stairwell on the way home, dizziness swallowing the world. Tamsin found me sitting on the landing, head against the wall, breathing hard. "Mara," she said, voice sharp with fear. "Talk." I tried to joke. My mouth wouldn't cooperate. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking. "Doctor." Patel arrived faster than I thought possible, kneeling beside me, checking my pulse with practiced focus. "You've been pushing," he said. Not angry, just firm. "You can't out-stubborn your body." Tamsin's eyes filled. "Is she dying?" she demanded, too blunt for politeness. Dr. Patel looked at her, then at me. "Not today," he said. "But she needs rest, and she needs to stop carrying every fight alone." Tamsin swallowed hard. "I can help," she said fiercely. "I can do stuff. I can cook. I can—" Her voice cracked. I reached for her hand, my fingers cold. "You already help," I whispered, "just by being here." She shook her head violently. "No," she said. "I'm not letting you go. People leave. You don't." The sentence hit me with unexpected weight. I had been afraid of being reduced to a burden again. I hadn't considered the other side, being someone's anchor. Doctor Patel helped me down the stairs, and as we moved, Tamsin stayed close, one hand on my elbow like a promise made physical. In my apartment later, she sat at the table and, with a scowl that tried to hide trembling, wrote a new note in careful letters. "Sorry for trouble. I will not let you fall." She slid it across to me. "Spelling?" she challenged. I laughed weakly. "Perfect," I said, and meant it in every way. By late summer, the investigation into Seaward Partners became public. Reporters came to Harborlight not to film my mother's staged redemption, but to document real tenant resistance. Diane's name appeared in an article about conflicts of interest. She stopped coming to the building. The city froze the buyout process until repairs were made and proper disclosures filed. Harborlight remained tired, but it was no longer powerless. In the midst of that, my treatment stabilized. Dr. Patel adjusted my regimen, and the numbness in my hands eased enough that I could type without fear. I began to sleep through whole nights again. Tamsin started school with a scholarship arranged through Inez's network. On her first day, she wore a second-hand jacket that actually fit, and a grin that looked suspiciously like pride. She came home with a spelling test marked 98%. She slammed the paper on the table. 2 points, she announced. I missed necessary. I raised an eyebrow. You missed a word even adults hate, I said. That's basically a win. She pretended to be offended, then laughed, loud and clear. The sound echoed in our small apartment, bouncing off the cheap walls. And for once the echo felt like celebration rather than intrusion. On the anniversary of Mr. Calder's death, we walked down to the docks at sunrise. The bay was calm, the ferries cutting gentle lines through the water. Tamsin held the tin box in both hands, its metal warmed by her grip. We had decided not to throw it away. Objects can be grief's containers. At the edge of the pier, she opened it and placed inside a new paper, a photograph of Harborlight taken from below. The building lit gold by dawn, stubborn on its hill. On the back she had written in neat handwriting, "We kept the sky." She closed the lid and set the tin on a bench, not as abandonment but as